Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into Alzheimer's disease. For decades, this was a condition where we could only really manage the symptoms, never touch the root cause. But that's all changing. A new and pretty controversial class of drugs is shaking everything up. And to really get why, we first have to look at what's actually happening inside the brain.
So what is going on in there? This isn't just about misplacing your keys. It is a full-on, slow-motion biological war. And get this, it's a war that's often waged for 20 years or even more before a single sign of trouble ever shows up.
All right, meet the two main culprits in this fight. On one side, you've got beta-amyloid plaques. Think of these as sticky, toxic gunk that builds up outside of your brain cells. And on the other side, you have tau tangles. These are twisted protein fibers that form inside the cells. This toxic duo is what scientists believe is the primary driver of the massive cell death that defines Alzheimer's.
Okay, so we've met our suspects, these plaques and tangles. Now let's zoom out and build a clearer profile of the disease they actually cause.
So, at its core, Alzheimer's is what we call neurodegenerative, which is just a fancy way of saying it gets progressively worse as more and more brain cells die off. And here's a really key distinction I want you to remember. Think of dementia as the collection of symptoms, the memory loss, the confusion. Alzheimer's is the specific disease that's causing those symptoms. It's kind of like how a fever is a symptom, but the flu is the specific virus causing it.
Now, while age is the single biggest risk factor, genetics can play a really shocking role. See, most of us have a gene called APOE3, which is kind of the baseline. But if you happen to inherit two copies of a specific variant called APOE4, well, your risk of developing Alzheimer's skyrockets by nearly 15 times. It is absolutely not a guarantee or a diagnosis, but it is a massive genetic red flag.
Maybe the cruelest thing about Alzheimer's is just how long it hides in the shadows. This isn't some sudden heart attack for the brain. It's a siege that can last for decades.
Just look at this timeline. The actual disease process, that buildup of plaques and tangles we talked about, can start a full 20 years before a single symptom is even noticed. Think about that for a second. A person can be in that preclinical stage for years, then move to mild cognitive impairment, and only then, often years later, finally get a dementia diagnosis when it starts to really impact their daily life.
So as all these brain cells are dying, the brain's really delicate chemical communication system just breaks down. And for decades, our only treatments focused on two parts of that breakdown. First, scientists noticed that levels of a key chemical for memory, called acetylcholine, were dropping. And second, they found that an excess of another chemical, glutamate, was literally exciting brain cells to death.
So these chemical problems became the main targets for that first generation of Alzheimer's drugs. But it is so crucial to understand this. These therapies were only ever designed to manage the effects of the disease, not to stop the destruction that was causing them in the first place.
For mild to moderate Alzheimer's, the go-to drugs are called acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, or ACHEIs. Yeah, I know, it's a total mouthful. But how they work is actually pretty clever.
Okay, so here's how it works. Your brain sends a message using that memory chemical, acetylcholine. But there's this little enzyme that's always on cleanup duty, and it gets rid of the chemical right away, which ends the signal. Now in Alzheimer's, you're not making enough of that message chemical, so the signal is really weak. These drugs work by basically blocking the cleanup enzyme. It's like turning up the volume on a really weak radio signal. The original message is still faint, but now it comes through way stronger and for longer.
And there are a few different versions of these drugs, each with its own little twist. You've got donepezil, which sticks around in the body for a super long time. Rivastigmine is interesting because it's available as a skin patch, which is a huge help for people who have trouble swallowing pills. And then galantamine has this kind of dual action mode to give those brain signals an extra boost.
Now for the later, more advanced stages of Alzheimer's, there's a different drug called memantine. And this one goes after that second problem we talked about, that toxic, cell-killing overflow of glutamate.
But here is the big but. This is the crucial limitation for all of these early drugs, and this quote from the source material really says it all. While they can give a small temporary boost, they do absolutely nothing to slow down the underlying destruction of the brain. The disease just keeps marching on in the background.
And that fundamental problem, the fact that we couldn't actually slow the disease, is what set the stage for a totally radical new approach. One that aims to stop Alzheimer's in its tracks, but has also become one of the biggest controversies in modern medicine.
So this is the new frontier: antibodies. These drugs are designed to do what no drug before them ever could. They go after the root cause, seeking out and clearing those beta-amyloid plaques we talked about at the very beginning. The whole strategy shifted from just managing symptoms to attacking the disease head-on.
This is what's known as a disease-modifying treatment. And for the first time in the history of this disease, the goal wasn't just to help a patient feel a bit better for a few months. The goal was to physically change the course of the disease and actually slow down the death of the brain itself.
But this is where the story gets really complicated, and it centers on the first of these drugs to get approved, aducanumab. It created this huge paradox. On one hand, you had brain scans that proved it was an absolute powerhouse at its job. It cleared out amyloid plaques like nothing else. But on the other hand, the billion-dollar question was, does clearing the plaques actually make patients better? The evidence that it improved memory or thinking was murky at best, and it sparked this massive scientific firestorm.
And on top of all the questions about whether it even worked, there was a serious risk, a side effect called ARI, which can cause dangerous brain swelling or tiny bleeds. And notice the cruel irony here. The risk is highest for people who have that APOE4 gene, the very same group that's already at the highest genetic risk for the disease. It means anyone taking the drug needs constant and expensive MRI monitoring. And then there was the price tag. The drug launched with an annual cost of $56,000 per patient. This, as you can imagine, immediately kicked off an intense debate. For a drug with unproven benefits and serious risks, who could possibly afford this? And was it even worth it?
This quote right here perfectly captures the situation. You see, the FDA gave the drug a special kind of accelerated approval based only on its ability to clear plaques. But that approval came with a huge catch. The company had to run another big trial to finally prove that clearing those plaques gives a real, tangible benefit to patients.
So why does all of this matter? Well, it matters because we have crossed a major threshold. We've gone from just patching up symptoms to actively targeting the disease itself. But this huge leap forward forces us to confront these incredibly difficult questions about what we value in a treatment and what level of risk and cost is acceptable for a benefit that's still uncertain.
And this all leaves us with the critical question for the future of Alzheimer's research. Being able to remove plaques from the brain is, without a doubt, a monumental scientific achievement. But if that doesn't reliably fix the symptoms, it really forces us to wonder if amyloid is just one piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle. And solving the rest of that puzzle, well, that's the great challenge that lies ahead.